I have new neighbors who bought the old Henderson house on the next road over. Rumor had it they were Yankees, and no one knew much about them. Apparently, they were quite prosperous. The Henderson property included a two-story farmhouse, a barn, outbuildings, and 212 acres of land. The farm was well maintained until Mr. Henderson grew old. His daughters had moved away, and with no one to run the farm, he put it up for sale and moved further south. This upset his daughters, who feared he would spend their inheritance before he passed away. However, he was in good health and sound mind, so they couldn't do anything about it. I found it amusing because I never liked those girls. I secretly agreed with my aunt, who would snort and say they were showing off too much to be decent. Old Southern speak for snobs. I met the new neighbors by chance when their Cadillac broke down on the side of the road, steam pouring from under the hood. I pulled over, as neighbors do. However, she must have seen too many redneck horror movies because she didn't open the door or roll down the window, just stared at me with panicked eyes. It was raining and getting colder, so I got back in my truck and drove away. When I reached the top of Henderson Hill, I called the sheriff's department. Everyone knows you have to get to the top of the hill to get a signal. Until then, you're in the dead zone, at least according to the locals. Well, John, why didn't you help her? Asked the county police. I tried, Wendell. She wouldn't open the door. I can't just leave her there. Get out and do something. Okay, let me find my slicker. Did you notice it's raining? Yeah, and it's cold. Besides, it's already dark and she's probably scared to death, so hurry up. If you're quick, I have leftover barbecue from the Democrat rally you can take back to the station. There's buns and salad, too. Do you have baked beans or potato salad? Take your time, Wendell. If you hurry, I might be persuaded to give up a couple of slices of the fat pie. Okay, no offense. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Does this cake have frosting? 20 minutes later, he met me, and we drove back down the hill. She was still there, crying. Wendell identified himself, and she rolled down her window. Ma'am, do you need help? Yes, please. Smoke started coming from under the hood, and it just stalled. I couldn't get through to anyone. It's a good thing you found me. I didn't find you, ma'am. John did. Why don't you open the latch and let him look under the hood? He's not a bad mechanic. I used to be a pretty good mechanic before everything became computerized. Nowadays, you need a PhD from MIT or you're out of a job. I couldn't afford the new equipment, so I stopped. It was a hobby anyway, not a way to make a living. It took about 2 seconds to spot the problem. The lower radiator hose was ruptured. Damn it, it had always been the bottom one. You need a new radiator hose, ma'am. Call the Bibile when Wendell drives you home, and they'll come and get it. It's easy to fix. They should be done before lunch. Not today. Billy's out of town, remember? His daughter's getting married on Sunday. He won't be back until Tuesday. Wendell looked too happy saying that. She went back into panic mode. I can't just leave it here. My husband would kill me. I stared at Wendell, watching the gears of his little brain turn. Don't say it. Don't say it. He said it. Hey, John, why don't you use one of your heavy trailers and haul it for her? It was late, cold, raining, and I was late for dinner. But you can't leave your neighbors, especially frightened women, in trouble. Sure, I can do that. I'll take it to my lot and leave it behind the fence for safety. Then whoever fixes it won't have to go out of their way. Is that okay with you? Thank you. We'll pay whatever you charge. Take me home, officer. She said officer, like it was something better than God, and Wendell couldn't get his door open fast enough. Then there was a crackle on the radio. A wreck on Route 12, and he was the closest. Damn this rain. Sorry, ma'am. John's going to take you home, and I gotta go. John, don't eat that kebab. I'll come back later. Sure, I'll put it in the refrigerator at the store. You know where the keys are. Lock it behind you this time. I don't need the cat having kittens again. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? Not while the odor lingers. Mrs. Hatfield, are you ready? She finally gave us her name, and I guess if the cop vouched for me, I really wasn't a serial homicidal maniac who preyed on older, attractive Yanks. She still sat as far away from me as she could. She and her husband owned Henderson's place. When we pulled up to the house, there were no lights on. Why aren't the lights on? Because the power went out. Didn't you notice how dark it was the last mile? What am I going to do? Do you have a flashlight, lanterns, and the like? Not that I know of. Well, Mrs. Hatfield, if you're going to live in the village, it's not a bad investment. Mr. Henderson had a generator in the basement. Is it still there? I don't know. We haven't had time to check yet. Well, put on your adventure hat. If it's still there, it's likely connected to the power grid. She was in luck. The machine was still in place and running, though barely. A large diesel unit, it made a hellish rumble through the building walls. It had enough fuel for about 4 hours. If it holds out, you'll be fine until the power comes back on. They don't usually keep it off for long this time of year. If I were you, I'd adjust the settings and invest in a barrel of diesel, just in case. She nodded vigorously, making notes on her clipboard. I'm going to go get your car now. Here's my license plate. If you need anything before your husband gets back, call me. Your car will be parked on my lot. The address is on the card. Good night, Mrs. Hatfield. I can't thank you enough. Don't worry about it. Good night. After making sure she was safe, I left and called Wendy, anticipating what I'd hear at home. Where have you been? Why didn't you call? It's okay, I missed you. I appealed to her delicate sensibilities. Sorry, babe. I got a call from the police. Billy's away for the weekend and they asked me to pick up a car from the curb. I'll be home in an hour and a half. I hope you squeeze the crap out of them for making you work in this weather. I'll get mine, don't worry. It was all about money. I didn't realize it, but her parents were well off, and I was doing okay. As far as I knew, she'd never needed anything, but the way she acted, you'd think we were living in poverty. She hadn't been like that until about a year ago. I always wondered what had triggered it. I picked up the trailer, towed the car, and got home as promised. She had already gone to bed, leaving me a note that dinner was in the microwave. A quick snack, a quick shower, and I was dead to the world until my alarm clock rang. The next day was sunny and warm, making me forget about the cold rain the day before. I didn't have much to do at the store, so I went to Advance, got a hose, rolled the car off the trailer, and fixed it. Around lunchtime, a man in his 40s, wearing a suit and tie with polished shoes and a concerned expression, entered the office. I'm Bennett Hatfield. I'm here to make arrangements to have my wife's car towed to the garage. Could you tell me the best mechanic in town? He was talking to Larry, my assistant and senior associate. He, Bobby, and Myra were my employees and friends. I was in the equipment rental business, backhoes, bulldozers, tractors, ditch diggers, and the like. It was a good business. Nobody was going to spend $29,000 or more on an excavator for a few hours of work when you could rent one for a few hundred. The downturn in the economy actually helped my business. More and more people were doing things themselves instead of hiring out. My equipment wasn't known for beauty, but it was all mechanically sound, and dirt didn't care if you had new paint. I charged a little less than the chains, and it worked out. Larry pointed at me and walked over. Bennett extended his hand. Bennett Hatfield. I couldn't help but smirk. John McCoy. Myra, who usually handles costumes, was standing behind us. She thought Bennett had come to rent something from our party supplies department and burst into laughter. He frowned. Sorry, Mr. Hatfield, we're not laughing at you. It's just Hatfield and McCoy? He stood for a moment, then smiled. I hope we won't be feuding. I left my shooting iron in Philadelphia. Okay, I melted mine into a plowshare. What can I do for you? I'm here to arrange to have my wife's car towed to the garage. I don't know anyone in town. Can you recommend someone? Don't worry about it. I had some free time this morning and fixed it. All it needs is a new hose and some antifreeze. Bring your wife any time before 6 and she can drive it home. He looked surprised. Well, okay. How much do I owe you? $40. The receipt for the hose and antifreeze is in the dashboard. That's not right. Yes, that's right. Check the receipt. No, I meant how much for your labor? Oh, I can't charge you for that. I don't make my living as a mechanic, and it wouldn't be right. We're neighbors. I live on Howell Road. You live on Henderson Road. Down here, you don't charge your neighbors for kindness. It's just not customary. He looked confused, so I tried to explain. If you wanted to rent an excavator, I'd charge you. If I needed legal advice, I'd expect you to charge me, but if you needed to borrow a tool or a ride, offering money would be offensive. Understand?" He nodded. "I guess so. It just takes a little getting used to." "Well, I can't thank you enough." He returned 45 minutes later with his wife. She was more attractive and younger than I had anticipated, but not young enough to be a trophy wife. Maybe 40, though she looked about 30. I guess a life of luxury isn't as exhausting as working for a living. Her husband just left her, probably busy with his lawyer stuff. She thanked me repeatedly for my help until I finally asked her to stop. "That's enough, Miss Hatfield. It's no big deal." "Maybe down here, but where I'm from, it's a pretty significant gesture. And since we're neighbors, call me Pam." She held out her hand. "John, and this is Myra and Larry." They were practically breathing down my neck, eager to learn more about her. She smiled, shook their hands, and instead of leaving, she asked Myra to give her a tour, stopping to look at various pieces of equipment and asking a million questions. She particularly appreciated the party supplies and rentals, especially the castle. The castle was actually a circus tent with turrets and flags. It could be divided into rooms of different sizes if necessary, making it popular for weddings. It was once a real circus tent, but when the circus closed down, I got it for next to nothing at an auction. With it, and a few smaller tents, I could turn a field into a fairy tale setting in 24 hours. Wendy wanted a new car, a Cadillac like our new neighbor had. Her Chevrolet Impala, which she had only gotten 2 years ago, no longer suited her. I reminded her that if we bought a new car, she couldn't trade it in for 4 years. That was the only way I'd agree to buy it. She scoffed. "This thing is almost worn out. I need a new car. Why are you arguing with me?" "Because you don't need a new car. You just want one. We can't keep up with the neighbors, Wendy. He's a lawyer, for God's sake. Your car will do just fine. If you don't think so, you can buy it yourself, as long as my name doesn't appear on the paperwork." I had her. Her credit history was terrible. While we were dating, she defaulted on a car loan and some credit card debt. I helped her get her car back, but refused to help with the credit card debt. She wouldn't pay for it. "I don't believe in credit cards. They're a trap and a waste." "But you have two." "Right, and both are business related. The American Express I use only as needed, and the other one I use twice a year, just to keep it active. I use them if I find a good deal on equipment purchases, and that's it." I made her sign a prenup to exclude my house and business from community property. My parents owned the house, and when they retired, they went to my sister's house in California. They fell in love with it and moved out, leaving the house to me. We hadn't even formalized the transfer of ownership yet. There was no rush. Wendy thought we did, and I didn't see a reason to bring it up. All the paperwork was filled out just in case. I kind of fell into my business. I was doing subcontract work for builders, mostly site preparation, and I got tired of driving 45 miles to get the equipment I needed. I had some money, my parents lent me some more, and I went into business. For the first 3 years, I invested almost all of my profits into the business, buying new equipment. In the 4th year, I paid my parents back. By the time I met and married Wendy, I was proud of what I had accomplished in such a short period and didn't want to lose it. We met at a Christmas party thrown by one of the contractors I did a lot of business with. I usually avoided such events. People trying to impress each other didn't appeal to me. But that night I was bored, so I went. Of course, all the women were dressed to kill. There were some really pretty ones there, and I'm a guy, so I danced, flirted, and had a good time. Wendy was there with someone else, but I managed to dance with her. There was a spark. We both felt it, but she was with someone else, so I didn't pursue it. As I was leaving, the hostess put something in my hand. "Caller." She kissed me on the cheek, and I shook her hand and drove away. I looked at the paper as I got into my truck. It was Wendy's number. I put it in the basket, intending to call, but Christmas was a busy time for my party supply business, so I left it at that. The week before Christmas, she came into the store, talked to Myra, and pointed me out. Myra giggled and wrote her a check. She approached. "I'd like to pick up my rental." "Sure. What's the name?" She handed me the paperwork. Male, good-looking, as chaperone for a Christmas party. Term, 5 hours. Duties, pleasant conversationalist, good dancer. Kissing skills preferred. Inability to dial a phone number considered if willing to be trained. Delivery to the specified address. What can I say? She was about 5'8", with a pretty face and breasts that seemed to defy gravity. Miss, I will personally take care of your rental. Additionally, we offer a money-back guarantee if the services prove unacceptable. Fair enough. She held out her hand. It's a deal, but be warned, I expect to be satisfied or I want my money back. She eventually burst into laughter, and we went for coffee to discuss further terms. Myra insisted I buy a new suit, and, not trusting me, made me take her to the mall. Her husband agreed, saying, I just want to see her make a man unhappy who isn't me. 4 hours and 8 suits later, she announced that we had found the one. I breathed a sigh of relief, but her husband only laughed. You don't think you're done, do you? No, we weren't done yet. The perfect shirt, tie, even the socks had to be checked. It took another 40 minutes to pick out shoes. You're not going to pick out my underwear, are you? Myra didn't blink an eye. Dark blue boxers, silk. You want to feel as good as you look, and I've already taken care of that. Please. Remind me to fire you sometime. Only if my severance package includes costume modeling, and I expect to see those drawers as well. You're rehired. If I beg you on my knees in the food court, will you let us go home? Maybe if you give me your word you'll get your hair cut tomorrow. Her husband only laughed as we got into the car. Since I was already dressed to the hilt, I decided to go all out and rented a Cadillac Escalade for the weekend. When I arrived to pick her up, I was feeling pretty dapper. But when I saw her, I realized I had overdone it. I'd love to be the artist who painted this dress on her. Shimmering green, with a slit at the side high enough that you could see the top of the seams, a neckline plunging almost to her navel. I had no idea how she was restraining those puppies. Despite the boldness of the outfit, she looked elegant. As I helped her into the car, I managed to catch a glimpse of her garters. I'm sure we talked on the way, but I can't remember a word of it. We danced and socialized, with me being introduced to people I'd instantly forgotten. She was the hit of the party and constantly asked to dance. She always seemed a bit wary, but it was up to her. During a slow number, I noticed a guy getting a little too close. Halfway through the song, she grabbed my hand and left Mr. Octopus standing there. No more slow dancing with anyone but you, she hissed in my ear as we walked back to the table. It worked on me. On the way home, she snuggled up to me as close as she could, nibbling on my ear. Every time we stopped at a light, I kissed her until the cars behind us honked. Before leaving her house, we steamed up the windows. After about 20 minutes, she asked me to walk her to the door, offering me coffee. I sat on the couch while she prepared the pot, then went to change. I was about to doze off when I heard someone clear their throat. I literally fell off the couch. When she said get out of the dress, she meant get out of it and put nothing else on. She stood there in just panties and garters. I thought I was going to go blind. Taut tummy, lips swollen and glistening. I couldn't speak. She got nervous when I didn't say anything. Here's the thing. I really like you. 12 hours later, I did get out of the car to bring us breakfast. Otherwise, the Escalade didn't move for 2 days. She was insatiable, alternately demanding and submissive. We did everything I knew how to do with a woman, and many other things I had no idea about, but she enjoyed teaching me. By Sunday, I had learned her triggers. She showed me her toy box, and we tried everything in combination with everything. We both marked each other as our own, and I never looked back. We moved in together after 2 months and married after 7. We agreed to spend a few years together before starting a family. She was 25 and I was 29. 3 years passed, and I kept hinting at starting a family. About a year ago, she started to change, becoming more demanding and materialistic. She decided we needed a new house to start a family, even though ours had 4 bedrooms, and I didn't see the need for more. Then, she maxed out her credit card, which she somehow managed to get despite her credit history. She didn't speak to me for 2 days when I paid it off and cut it in half. She had a job and made decent money but always stayed broke. I paid all the bills, electric, phone, cable, and other normal household expenses, except groceries. She agreed from the beginning that this would be her responsibility, and I let her do it. If you opened her closet, you'd see clothes with tags she'd probably never wear, and 4 or 5 pairs of shoes that had never seen the ground. The silence about the car incident lasted about 5 days. On the 6th day, she came home and found me pulling her clothes out of the closet. She watched but remained silent. "I'm not going to live like this. If I'm going to live alone, I'm going to live alone. I called your mom and she wasn't happy, but she agreed to let you stay with her for 2 weeks. We should be able to find you an apartment or a house by then. I'll put down a deposit, pay the first 2 months' rent, hook up the electricity, and cover the first 2 months' bills. It will give you time to learn to live on your own and budget better because now you'll have to pay your own way." She surprised me by fainting. I took off her shoes and laid her on the floor, using a cold rag to wipe her forehead. She woke up in surprise. "John, I just had a strange dream. You were kicking me out, but I don't remember why." She looked at her part of the closet through the open door, noticed the clothes on the bed beside her, the suitcases on the floor, and cried. She started sobbing, begging me not to make her leave, promising she would change, pleading desperately. I let her go on for a while before telling her to wash off her makeup and meet me in the kitchen. She lowered herself into a chair without meeting my gaze. "I'm serious, Wendy. I'm not going to live like this anymore. These tantrums, the out-of-control spending, the refusal to talk about starting a family, it's like I don't know you anymore. If you want to leave, say so. If not, things have to change." She eventually confessed that the thought of motherhood scared her to death, constantly reminding her of her own childhood. She was the second of 3 children, only a year apart in age. As the middle child, she felt lost in the hustle and bustle, and when her parents separated when she was 12, it affected her deeply. I can still see my mom crying. She had 3 teenagers, she was alone, and the stress was getting to her. She started drinking and pretty much ignored us. My dad didn't show up after the first year. He moved halfway across the country. I don't want to expose a child to that. I took her hand. "Darling, I'm sorry you had such a rough childhood, but I'm not talking about a full house, just 1 child. If we decide we need another one, we'll wait at least 2 years, and it's a big deal, but I'll never leave you. I promise." For about 3 weeks, we were careful to avoid each other, but gradually we turned into a normal young couple. She stopped spending so much and even opened a savings account. 3 months later, she showed me the balance, and I was amazed. I told her how proud I was of her. She laughed. "Don't be too proud. It'll be empty soon." I thought she was going to say she was buying a new car, but she said no. She had another use for the money. She wanted to buy furniture for the nursery and asked if I liked light blue. It took a second to register. "What? What did you just say?" She smiled that smile women have when they know they've turned your world upside down. "I said we're going to have a son in about 7 months. The nursery needs to be finished, so you're going to have to cut back a little on the store, especially near the end." I never cried in her presence. She told me in my office, having just come from the doctor's. She had stopped taking her pills, wanting to surprise me. And the plan worked. When the tears started, it scared her. "Did I make a mistake? I thought that's what you wanted. If you—" That was all she had time to say before I covered her with kisses. Soon enough, her tears mingled with mine. Myra realized something was up when we went out later. Being delicate and reserved, she blurted it out. "What the hell is going on with you two? You look like someone slapped you, and you both enjoyed it." "Myra, can you keep a secret?" She nodded affirmatively. This woman was better than the internet when it came to the rapid dissemination of information. "Myra, we're having a baby. 7 more months, and it's going to be a boy. Promise me you won't tell anyone. We want to surprise my mom." "Promise?" "Uh-huh," she muttered, already trying to pull her phone out of her pocket as she walked away. I watched her smirking, then turned back to Wendy. "I hope you've already told your mom." She grinned back. "I checked in here before I got here. Everyone in town will know about it before closing tonight. I figured if we told her, it would take the burden off me." As was her habit, when we went to lunch, people stopped us in the street to hug Wendy and shake my hand. We almost didn't have time to eat because of the constant congratulations. When we returned, there was a huge banner hanging over the counter, white with blue bows. "Congratulations to John and Wendy. It's a boy." I looked at Myra, and she smirked. "As if I could keep such a big secret. You knew I'd explode if I couldn't tell anyone." I laughed and went back into the study. The pregnancy was rough. After 7 months, Wendy was put on bed rest. I looked at her pale, gaunt face and realized that we would never have another child. It would be too dangerous for her. Wendy wasn't a model patient. Her mother had moved in with her, the only one who could be there for her, mostly because when things got really bad, she'd ask her to shut up and leave her alone for a couple of hours. The labor lasted 17 hours before they finally performed a C-section. Wendy was on the verge of exhaustion. When she was finally able to speak, she told me, "Never again." I agreed with her. She was already in the hospital, so she had her tubes tied before she left. William Bryan Sanford weighed almost 9 pounds, which explained a lot of her pain. He had a full head of thick black hair, just like me. I was disappointed when the nurse said they would probably fall out early before his real hair color showed up. She was wrong. He never lost his hair, and it remained black. If you've never experienced it, all the words in the universe can't describe the feeling you get when you become a parent. It is breathtakingly beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It is no longer about you, and it will never be about you again, even when they are grown. They become your world, and everything you do is dedicated to their well-being. Spontaneous trips and romantic weekends are a thing of the past. Now you have to plan everything. Load up on the necessary gear, even if it's just a trip to the grocery store. To my disappointment, Wendy didn't take to motherhood as well as I thought she would. She obviously loved him, but as soon as I came home, she would hand him to me and lay in the chair for an hour. She called it baby recovery time. I didn't mind walking around with him in my arms, talking about how the day went and what I wanted out of our life together. I talked about Little League, Boy Scouts, camping, girls, anything that would interest a boy. He watched my face intently and smiled, without understanding a word. Wendy was incredibly annoyed that he never cried with me. I'd come home and he'd be crying, especially if he wasn't feeling well. I would pick him up and start walking with him, and 90% of the time he would immediately calm down. I took 2 weeks off to be with Wendy and Billy after the birth. When I got back, there was a big sign in front of the building. *** Sanford and Son Equipment Rentals. No junk. Myra and Laurie stood there smirking. Tears came to my eyes. I had a slideshow of Billy, Wendy, and us together on the screensaver. My friendship with the Hatfields began gradually. One day, Pam came over wanting to rent a tractor. I asked what she needed it for. "I want to plant a garden. I've already ordered seeds from Baker's Creek. I need a tractor and equipment to prepare the beds." I admired her determination, but wouldn't rent her a tractor. This surprised her immensely. "Why not?" "Because you don't know how to operate it. Tractors can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. If I lease it to you and you hurt yourself, I'll feel really bad. Plus, I'll lose you as a customer and a friend. I don't want that on my conscience. Besides, you don't need to rent one. I've seen that little Yanmar and all the equipment in your shed. You already have everything you need." Mr. Henderson had a big auction when he retired and got rid of all his farm equipment. He bought the Yanmar later because he liked having a tractor around and enjoyed gardening. I bet it didn't even have 500 hours on it. It won't turn on. I saw the look of determination on her face. I knew that if I didn't help her, she'd find someone else. "The battery's probably dead. Look, tomorrow's Saturday. Why don't I come by and look at it?" "Oh, I couldn't take you away from your family." "No, they'll be with me." That Saturday, I took Wendy and Billy to Pam's house, and Pam cooed over the baby for an hour, holding him the whole time. Wendy was annoyed that Billy had been crying, but stopped when Pam picked him up. I brought a charger with me and hooked it up to the tractor. While it was charging, Bennett and I looked around for a possible garden plot. "Are you sure you want her to ride the tractor?" His answer was honest enough. "No, but you have no idea how determined she can be. I'm asking you to keep an eye on her and give her guidance." We talked about it while Pam and Wendy hid in the kitchen. They eventually emerged with a plate of sandwiches and a big bowl of potato salad. We ate while talking about Pam's garden projects. After clearing the table and refreshing their drinks, they sat and listened. "Ben and I have already talked about it. He's going to put a crossbar and seatbelt on the tractor before you get serious about it. Come on out to the barn, and we'll give you your first lesson." I pulled the tractor out of the barn and had Pam sit on it. I showed her the brakes, throttle, hydraulics, and gears. I need to emphasize this, and I want you to remember it carefully. The gears in a tractor operate differently from those in a car. In a tractor, the vehicle will start moving as soon as you release the clutch, regardless of the gear you're in. It won't stall like a car. So if you forget and start in a high gear, you could lift the front end off the ground. If you're on a slope or an uneven surface, you might flip it over. That's why I recommend using a collapsible bar and a seatbelt. It might be uncomfortable, but it will keep you safe. I had Pam put the tractor in low gear and low range, and she drove across the field slowly. I walked beside her, giving directions. We stopped frequently so she could practice moving the hydraulic three-point hitch up and down. I then set up the rotary plow. Never start the tractor without any equipment attached. That way, if you accidentally depress the clutch or encounter a steep slope, the equipment will help prevent you from rolling over. It might be a bit of a hassle, but it's worth it compared to the alternative. I asked her to lower the plow and make a few passes over the selected area. She beamed with joy as Ben took pictures. She was disappointed when I started the tractor, parked it back in the barn, and took out the key. "It wouldn't start anyway. The battery's dead. I have a friend coming on Tuesday to install the crossbar and seatbelts. I'll get you a new battery, and he'll install it and give you a spare key. But you shouldn't drive it alone until Ben is home. We'll come back next Saturday, and I'll show you how to use and change the equipment." We exchanged hugs and handshakes, then headed home. On the drive back, Wendy was animated. "She has a beautiful house. It's nothing like Mr. Henderson's. She has paintings on the walls that must be worth a fortune. She mentioned she has a trust fund while we were talking about art. Did you know they still own their house up north? It used to belong to her grandmother, and now it's hers." "That's great for them. They're a lovely couple. They deserve it." The rest of the drive was quiet. Later, I saw Wendy studying the prints and their values. She was right. Some of them were worth thousands. Wendy returned to her job. She enjoyed her work, and we didn't need her income that much yet. Besides, I knew that staying home all day with no one to talk to would drive her crazy. We had a great time teaching Pam how to drive the tractor. Ben learned too, though he wasn't as enthusiastic. Pam planted her garden and bought a small cultivator for times when the tractor wasn't needed. She cried tears of joy when she harvested her first string beans. She continued to expand her garden, despite my warnings that it might become overwhelming. She just laughed. "Ben leaves early and comes home late. I can only do so many chores around the house, and I don't like just sitting around watching TV. Besides, I have plenty to talk about on my blog." Pam started a blog called *Gone Country*, which documented her adventures adapting to life in the countryside. It quickly gained popularity for its blend of humor, entertainment, and occasional seriousness. The blog was filled with pictures and videos, many featuring me, as I was often helping her out. She affectionately referred to me as her spiritual advisor in all things rural, which was a bit awkward, especially when Myra began reading it. Pam was determined to go as organic as possible. I introduced her to a friend who owned a stable with horses, and he agreed to give her some manure for her garden. The catch was that she had to clean the stalls to get it. I thought that would be the end of her enthusiasm, but soon she was decked out in gloves, boots, and thick clothing, what she dubbed her shit uniform. Her blog even featured a photo of her in full gear with a bandana covering her hair. She cleaned 3 stalls twice a week, and her compost pile grew into a small mountain. For a while, Wendy joined me on my visits to Pam's, but gradually she started coming less frequently. I've learned everything I could about manure, crop rotation, and organic pesticides, Wendy said one day. I took Billy along with me almost every time, keeping his carrier in the shade where I could keep an eye on him. During those visits, Pam spent as much time with him as she did working in her garden. As our friendship grew closer, I asked Pam if she ever wanted children. Yes, I did. When it didn't happen, we got tested. Ben is infertile. It happened when he was younger. We talked about adoption, but he wasn't comfortable with it. I left the subject alone. He's my husband and soulmate, and I can't face the thought of not being with him. Sometimes when I hold Billy, I think about what we're missing. Then he messes his diaper, and I'm grateful to be able to hand him over to my parents. Here, take him, she said, holding Billy out as if he were a bucket of toxic waste. Ben came out later and joined us in the shade. John, I need a favor. My new partners and I are planning a business meeting, and I want to host an old Southern barbecue here. I want you and Wendy to cater it. And John, if you want to discuss this further, you'll get paid. This isn't just a casual gathering, it's a business event. I'd have to hire someone else otherwise, and I know how good your restaurant is. I want my partners to remember this event. I hadn't cooked professionally in years and missed it, so I agreed. Ben and Pam seemed relieved. Thanks, John. I'll need party supplies, tents, chairs, tables, and so on. Pam will handle the coordination. Most of our clients will be here, so I want to make a great impression. 3 weeks wasn't a lot of time to prepare for such an event. Pam began meeting with us daily to coordinate. My first question was how many people we would be cooking for. We have 80 confirmed, but plan for 100 to be safe. We don't want to run out of food. How many kids? None. Adults only. I frowned at this. What? Pam asked, noticing my expression. Nothing, I replied. Spit it out, John. If you have something to say, just say it. Okay. I think you're missing the mark. This is the South, where family is everything. You should definitely invite the wives and kids. It'll help create a more personal connection. Sure, some people might not like it, but most will be impressed. And while sending out invitations is important, a personal phone call can make a bigger impact. Find out how many kids will be attending and their ages. Then plan some age-appropriate games and activities. Saying, "Be sure to come," will resonate much more than a simple note asking for their presence. Pam stared at me in surprise before picking up the phone to call Ben. Have you sent out the invitations yet? No? Great. We need to revise them. I also need the names and phone numbers of each wife. I'll explain later. Bye, sweetie. She looked at me wide-eyed. Have you ever thought about running for office? You'd win with the kebab vote? No, I said with a laugh. It's just that I've attended enough parties to pick up a few things. Pam got to work, and our guest list grew from 100 to nearly 300. We hired 3 local teenagers to help with serving, and on my team were Wendy, Myra, and Larry. The day was perfect. Hot, but breezy. We set up a tent as a dining area and installed fans in the rafters to keep it cool. We had 400 pounds of pork, 20 chickens, and 2 beef briskets cooked separately for our Jewish partners, with clear labels for the kosher dishes. The menu included potato salad, coleslaw, baked beans, zucchini casserole, and grilled vegetables, mostly from Pam's garden. For dessert, we had an assortment of homemade cakes and brownies, plus chilled watermelon for the kids. Despite my exhaustion, it was worth it. We invited 300 people, but 420 showed up, thanks to the number of children. Larry kept an eye on the teenagers as they parked the cars. Before dinner, guests mingled and chatted for an hour. We kept the service casual to maintain a relaxed atmosphere. Due to the family-focused theme, no alcohol was allowed in the dining tent. Instead, we set up a small marquee with 2 kegs and an open bar, which wasn't to open until an hour after the meal. The senior partners made it clear that excessive drinking was not acceptable. Kids ran around in packs, laughing and playing on the equipment we'd set up and participating in various games. Pam and Ben were exceptional hosts, moving from group to group to ensure everyone was having a great time. True to tradition, the men gathered to discuss business, while the women talked about their families. We provided soft seating under each shady tree. I took a moment to admire Wendy. elegant in her conservative sundress and with her hair styled in a bun. She was surrounded by guests praising our dishes. We exchanged a lot of business cards throughout the day. Just before the event concluded, we gathered everyone in a secluded dining tent for a brief speech. I had arranged for a small public address system with microphones. The senior partner thanked everyone for coming and wished them success in their future endeavors. He praised Pam and Ben for their excellent organization and thanked Wendy and me for hosting. Then, he surprised everyone with his next words. Known for his long speeches, he kept it short. "That's all I'll say. It's been such a great time that I don't want to spoil it. We have some food left and containers available, so please take some home. And don't forget, the ice cream is ready. Let's all have a scoop." He received a standing ovation for his speech and walked out of the tent. We had ice cream machines with a variety of flavors: chocolate, banana, pineapple, blueberry, and vanilla. The kids, and even some adults, got ice cream headaches from eating too quickly. Pam's garden was a hit. I saw her several times giving tours and answering questions. She would often pick ripe tomatoes or handfuls of beans and hand them out. The watermelons we had chilled for dessert, some from her own garden, became a favorite. Their larger seeds made them especially popular for the kids' seed-spitting contest. Wendy nearly had a heart attack when Pam handed her the check. The celebration had been so grand that Ben insisted on covering the bill, turning the event into a full-blown corporate affair. Along with the payment, there was an additional check for a 25% bonus, accompanied by a note from the senior partner expressing gratitude once again. I took the bonus check and distributed part of it to Larry, Myra, and the kids who had helped. The remainder I gave to Wendy. She deserved it. Ben worked for a firm specializing in business law, and I started getting calls almost immediately to handle more parties. The demand was so high and the profit so lucrative that we decided to formalize it into a separate business. Wendy quit her job to manage it full-time, and she excelled at it. With all the rentals now coming through us, I promoted Myra to rental manager, and she hired her husband Donnie, who had been laid off. Everything was falling into place, except for one thing. "She's the boss at home and at work. I'll never make another decision for the rest of my life. It's all your fault, John." "Get over it, Donnie," I said, laughing. His mood lightened a bit. Wendy started dressing more stylishly and sometimes had evening meetings with clients. We finally made enough to buy her a Cadillac, which I thought was a nice touch. Winter passed, and Saturdays became packed with work, either hosting the event, planning it, or meeting with clients. Wendy managed the meetings and planning, while I took care of the equipment, staff, and food prep. We were making more from the parties than from the rental business, but as time went on, we barely had time for each other. The situation hit a tipping point when Wendy started having meetings on Saturdays, sometimes not coming home until after 11. I asked her to cut back, but she insisted it was best for the clients and their schedules. After 3 consecutive weeks of this, I lost my patience. "The next late meeting is on you," I told her. "I won't cook, I won't coordinate, and I won't be there." "I thought this was a partnership," she protested. "Right now, I'm more interested in a husband and wife partnership. Choose what's more important, business or us." She grumbled, but I ignored her and went to get Billy, who had been woken up by the argument. I followed through with my threat. The next month, she had an appointment that kept her out until 11:30. On Sunday afternoon, she wanted to discuss the next event with me. No. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I won't help with the planning or coordination, and I certainly won't cook. I told you the next contract that cost me a Saturday night with my wife would be the first one you handle solo. I'm taking Billy for a ride." I left her stunned. The event was a disaster. The food, service, and overall atmosphere were all criticized. There was no bonus, and the client expressed disappointment that Wendy hadn't lived up to her reputation. Up to this point, she had been treating me poorly. On Sunday, she emerged from the bedroom waving a small white handkerchief. "A truce?" I fed Billy his breakfast and replied, "No." Her eyes widened in surprise. "I won't accept an armistice. I want a surrender. Meet my conditions and we can move forward. Refuse or ignore them and it's over. No negotiations. Take it or leave it. I lifted Billy into my arms. I'm going to visit Ben and Pam. He needs my advice on something. We'll be back in an hour or so. Billy absolutely adored Pam, and the feeling was mutual. She often babysat for us during party events, and one of his first words was Pam. When he said it, she was moved to tears. As Billy learned to walk, he would dart toward Pam as soon as I set him down, his little steps shaky but determined. He soon learned to say Ben and would try to follow him around too. Ben had been eyeing a small race car in one of the barns. Mr. Henderson, who never drove it but loved racing and sponsored it, had left it behind. Although the engine was blown, the frame and transmission were intact. "Do you think it can be fixed?" Ben asked. "Not really. It needs a new engine and some other parts. It can't be repaired, but it can be rebuilt. Why do you want to do that?" Ben looked a bit sheepish. "I'm a huge NASCAR fan. I've always wanted to drive a race car. This would be perfect." "Well, you never know. How does Pam feel about it?" "She's not too thrilled, but is willing to watch one race. I need you to reassure her it's safe." "It is, isn't it?" "Relatively. I don't know of anyone who's died in a car like that, but injuries can happen. Start with beginner races and take it from there." We got the car repaired, and Ben took some lessons from experienced racers. Before long, he was racing every Friday night at the local dirt track. Wendy and I reconciled, and we went to watch him one night. It was noisy and dirty, but Ben was clearly enjoying himself. Larry and a few neighborhood kids were his pit crew, and the rules were loose enough that we could hang out with them in the pits. During one race, Ben was in the lead when he started losing speed and position. He drove into the pits, and we soon realized it wasn't a mechanical issue. Ben had been fighting the flu all week, and the heat had drained his energy. We helped him out of the car and started administering fluids. Ben and Pam were both disappointed. He was leading his class in points and had a good chance of becoming the points champion. But missing the race would hurt his chances. Larry suggested, he's allowed to have a substitute in case of illness." He looked directly at me. "It won't work, Larry. The cage is designed for Ben's size. I wouldn't fit in it, and it has to be someone his size or smaller," I replied. We both turned to Pam. "Oh no, I don't know anything about racing." "You don't need to race, just shift gears. Stay behind the group and keep out of trouble. Ben will get credit for finishing, and it'll help him with the points." Ben, listening in, urged, "Do it, honey. I really want that trophy. The cage will protect you. Just be cautious." Pam stared at him for a moment before saying, "Give me a helmet, and if I crash, no one says a word." We buckled her into the car. "Keep a low profile, maintain a steady speed, and let the others pass. Are you sure about this?" She looked me in the eye and nodded firmly. "No." With that, she slammed her foot on the gas, sending gravel flying in all directions. The first 15 laps went smoothly. The other drivers kept their distance, understanding the situation. Except for one driver. He was in close competition with Ben for the points, and if he could knock Pam out of the race, it would significantly boost his standing. On the next lap, he made a deliberate move to collide with her, sending a jolt of fear through Pam. We heard her shout into the headset, "What the hell is he doing?" I was on a different headset. "He's trying to take you out. Next time he comes at you, brake and then accelerate. He'll hit you, but won't have the speed to cause serious damage. If he speeds up, he might get caught in traffic and lose positions." Pam executed the maneuver perfectly. When he tried to hit her, she braked just before he could pick up speed and then sped away. He got caught in a tangle of cars, and Pam won that lap. Unfortunately, he caught up again and rammed her into the wall. The caution alarm blared, and she pitted. She leaped out of the car, glaring at the crumpled fender, and threw her helmet into the car. "Can you fix it?" "We could pull it out, but it wouldn't be ready in time," I said. She seemed more energized than defeated. "Rip that thing off and get me back in the race." "I'm going to run this jerk into the wall. Go, go, go!" Laurie tugged at her wing as I strapped her back into the car. "Don't be reckless. It can lead to injuries. Watch him. He'll try the same thing again." Laurie yelled, "Clear!" and Pam roared back onto the track. She drove like a woman possessed, overtaking cars with impressive speed. I saw the next move coming and shouted into the headset, "Cut to the left, now!" Pam swerved to the top of the track, catching the aggressive driver off guard. He crashed into another car, causing chaos. Pam zipped past him, and when the caution was lifted, she was in third place. By the time the checkered flag waved, she had taken the lead but ultimately finished 7th out of 15. The driver who'd tried to take her out didn't finish and was listed as 15th, falling even further behind Ben. As Ben's team pulled into the pit lane, Pam got out of the car, yanked off her helmet, and taunted the driver. "How does it feel to be beaten by a girl, asshole?" "Woo, woo, woo." She bent over and patted her backside. "Kiss it." Then she started giggling and hugging Ben. The driver, stunned and unsure how to respond, took a deep breath. I stepped in. "You should use this as a lesson. She beat you at your own game. Show some respect." His team, who had been ready to confront Pam, now grinned. Defeated, the driver turned and walked away. Wendy was snapping photos like a madwoman. Pam got hooked on racing after that. She invested some of her trust fund money in a car and joined the local women's division. Though she started late in the season, she won 2 races. Ben won his trophy as planned. They were already gearing up for the next year, with their firm and clients agreeing to paint both cars in matching colors, prominently featuring their logos along with ours. The dirt track where Pam and Ben raced was small, barely legal, and more of a recreational playground. But many successful racers had started their careers on such tracks. For them, it was a shared passion that brought them even closer. Wendy and I, on the other hand, seemed to have less in common beyond Billy. Our business had grown, and we now managed 2 crews. Wendy dressed more stylishly, acted with more confidence, and had increasingly less time for me and Billy. She joined a professional women's organization and became quite active, attending meetings and social events every couple of weeks. I didn't mind her involvement, and I was genuinely proud when she won an award. At the banquet, when I was introduced as her husband, I noticed several of her friends looking concerned. Although I was joking when I asked if she had another city husband, her face turned a deep shade of red. She recovered quickly. "No, honey. They were just surprised to see I didn't invent you. You should come to the mixers more often. Let me show you off." Her explanation seemed reasonable, but something still felt off. Our workload was heavy, so I set the issue aside. With things slowing down in early fall, we reverted to our original crew. They were well trained, and we often let them handle things, while one of us made occasional appearances to ensure everything was running smoothly. We had built a solid customer base, and some had become good friends. One of them, Ben's boss, wanted to host a combined birthday and victory party for Ben to celebrate his racing achievements and show appreciation. They wanted me to cook. "How many people?" I asked. "About 40, all adults, just his friends. We don't want you there in a professional capacity per se, but Ben considers you one of his closest friends. He says if it weren't for you, he and Pam might not have stayed. We didn't want to offend you by inviting someone else." "I'd love to cook, but let's keep it simple. How about I handle the meat, pork and chicken, and make coleslaw? Have your wives prepare the desserts and side dishes. I'm sure Ben will appreciate it more." I informed Wendy about the party and gave her the date. "I have an event on that day," she said. "We already signed a contract. I can't make it." I was a bit frustrated. They're our friends. If they hadn't asked us to cater their first party, we wouldn't even have a business. It'd be an insult not to show up. Just stop by, make sure everything's running smoothly, and then hand things over to the team. Think of Pam and Ben. I set up the meat slabs and drove my truck back home to create more parking space. Since our properties were connected, Ben and I had built a path through the woods from my patio to his porch. It was much faster to use quad bikes for transport. If I saw a pink helmet on the railing, I knew Pam was visiting. The party was in full swing, and Wendy had just called to say she was stuck at work, but would arrive within the hour. We were running low on ice that one of the partners was supposed to bring. I had some leftover ice from a previous party, so I volunteered to fetch more. I had to use Ben's car since mine was locked. Unfortunately, Ben had forgotten to fill the tank, and I ran out of gas halfway home. As I walked back through the woods, I saw the blinds on the patio door pulled back, revealing a couple on the sofa who were clearly engaged in an intimate moment. My first thought was that one of the neighborhood kids had broken into the house, a concern given the recent increase in break-ins and vandalism. Just as I reached for my phone to call 911, the couple moved. I saw Wendy, with her top discarded, and recognized the man as one of Ben's younger employees. They must have been wondering why he wasn't at the party. My initial instinct was to confront them, but Ben's experience as a divorce attorney had taught me to approach such matters with caution. "I hate it," he once told me. "You get cynical watching people tear their worlds apart." If people would just approach it logically, they could save themselves a lot of grief, Ben had said, but logic can be hard to maintain, especially in the wake of witnessing infidelity. Things get even worse if there's an assault involved. Typically, it's the man who gets accused, which weakens his bargaining position considerably. Sometimes, the accusations can be so severe that he might even lose custody of his children due to his lawyer painting him as a violent threat. No one truly wins in a divorce, particularly when children are involved. Lawyers make money, but that's about it. Standing in the woods, grappling with the painful reality of my wife's betrayal, it was difficult to think clearly. My body shook with rage as I headed toward the house, but remembered Ben's advice about maintaining a favorable position. I ducked behind the trees to gather my composure. I walked a short distance down the path and called Ben. He answered cheerfully, his voice carrying a hint of his usual exuberance. "Hey, buddy, what's taking so long? Do I need to send Pam to fetch you?" "No, just hold off on Pam. I need to speak with her. I saw Wendy at the house, and she wasn't alone and wasn't dressed properly. I want to confront her, but I think it's better if I don't do it alone. Can you send the most sober one of them as a witness? Also, I need a recommendation for a divorce lawyer." Pam's voice was filled with concern. "Oh, poor guy. Are you sure? If you weren't, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Stay put until I get there." 20 minutes later, Pam, Ben, and 2 of his partners' wives arrived. "Are you sure about this, John?" Pam asked. I showed them the photos I had taken. One of the women stepped forward. "I'm a divorce lawyer, John, and a good one. I run my own practice, separate from my husband's. I can offer you advice on how to proceed and provide my services if you need them." I had only known her socially as the wife of one of Ben's partners, not as a lawyer. Pam hugged me, rubbing my shoulders to soothe me, and reminded me to think of Billy. "Thank you, Julie. I'll take both your advice and services. What should I do?" Julie's advice was firm. "The hardest thing you can do in this situation is to stay calm. Avoid engaging in any conversation when you confront them. Let me handle that. Control yourself, John. It'll give you the upper hand." Her smile in the darkness was sharp and knowing. "But if he's foolish enough to try anything in front of a group of lawyers, you have every right to defend yourself." Ben picked up his phone. "They're almost here. Let's get ready." They orchestrated the setup meticulously. The senior partner, who was supposed to fetch the ice, was pulling into my driveway. Meanwhile, the others waited outside on the deck, keeping to the shadows to avoid detection from the patio door's light. We heard a knock on the door. "Wendy, are you there? John sent us for ice, and we're out," the senior partner called out loudly. When there was no response, he continued, "Well, he did give us a key. Let's go in, boys. I don't like being in someone else's house when he's not around." Wendy and her lover scrambled to gather their clothes when they heard the door open. Wendy flung the door open just in time for her partner to dart out onto the deck and hide in the shadows. I flipped on the outside light, and the look on his face was priceless. We had a switch outside for when we wanted to enjoy the evening without going back inside, usually right before we got undressed. 4 cell phones clicked as he stood there, holding his pants, shorts, and shoes. Wendy managed to get dressed quickly, led her partner into the kitchen, and saw us standing on the porch. She screamed, bolted out of the house, and fled. The senior partner raised his hand, signaling silence. "Not a word. Be in my office at 9 o'clock on Monday. Now go." His voice carried the weight of authority as he walked away, leaving the rest of us behind. Pam and Ben sat beside me, holding my hands to keep me grounded. Julie handed me her card and instructed me to be at her office at 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. She gave me a comforting hug. We returned to the party, mostly to avoid being alone in the house. Naturally, the guests left early, and I spent the night in their guest room. I struggled to sleep, and Pam eventually roused me by sending Billy to jump on me. It's impossible to sleep with a 2-year-old bouncing around. Pam had picked up Billy early, telling my mother-in-law that I was having too much fun, and that she volunteered to pick him up. She had done this before when we started our party business. Billy sat on Pam's lap, feeding her breakfast, and giggling as syrup smeared all over her face. It brought smiles to all of us. When Pam took Billy to the bathroom to clean up, Ben suggested we talk when he was in bed. In the afternoon, we held our first military conference. Pam cut to the chase. Divorce? Yes, I confirmed. Looking back, it's clear. We stopped sharing dreams. She always wanted the city life, while I'm rooted in the country. And Billy? I want custody. I believe a child would disrupt the lifestyle she wants. Ben offered his insights. Billy may not fit into her lifestyle, but he gives her leverage. She could use custody battles to secure a bigger financial settlement. The rest is secondary. Julie added a cautionary note. Be careful. Wendy will fight dirty. We need to keep negotiations from escalating into a full-blown war. I didn't see Wendy for 6 days. When I came home, there she was. It took all my restraint not to throw her out immediately. Seeing the anger in my eyes, she backed away. Please don't say anything now. I know I deserve it, but I'm just here to collect my things and see Billy. Please, John. Just let me do that, and I'll leave quietly. You can even keep my car keys. I reluctantly agreed, letting her interact with Billy. She'd been so absent lately that he seemed disinterested. She asked for her keys to open the trunk and requested my help with her clothes. While I went inside for a moment, I heard her car start. I rushed outside and reached her before she could drive away, snatching the keys and throwing them into the driveway. Wendy screamed as I pulled Billy from his car seat. Fuck you! He's mine, and you can't keep him! Billy cried, confused by the commotion. Wendy was cursing loudly when she noticed Pam filming the whole scene on her iPhone. Pam had arrived on her custom-designed 4-wheeled motorcycle, checking on Billy and making sure I was all right. She'd stop by briefly, then leave before Ben got home. Oh, you! I should have known you'd be here. Are you getting some before hubby comes back? How many times has poor Ben been left with leftovers? Is he hiding in the closet watching? Pam turned pale with fury. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't shouted. Wendy, get out now, and I mean right now. From now on, if you want to see Billy, you'll need court permission. Leave my life before I call the police. There was so much more I wanted to say, but Billy's well-being came first. Wendy walked away, continuing her shouting. Pam made sure to record every word. The next day, Julie obtained the tape and filed a restraining order against Wendy until she underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The recording of Wendy's screaming was part of the evidence. I learned that Wendy's new lover was the same man she had been with. It seemed her situation was deteriorating. He was fired from his job because of the affair. The company's statement was diplomatically worded, but the message was clear. No references and no future opportunities. He ended up taking a lower-paying job elsewhere. I sent a letter to all our clients, informing them that I would handle all existing contracts, but would no longer be involved after that. Wendy would take over from there. I was tempted to throw in the towel, but Julie persuaded me otherwise. You have a good reputation, and you might want to return to this field later. Besides, Wendy's new income might be useful to her in the future. Wendy hired a lawyer, and the legal battle commenced. She wanted the house, but it was still in my parents' name. She also demanded the party equipment, but since it was rented from my company as per our prenuptial agreement, she couldn't claim it. Julie froze most of our accounts. We agreed that Wendy would manage one team while I ran the other. Funds could only be used for payroll and essential supplies. Everything else remained frozen until the divorce was finalized. All profits from my obligations went into a new account fully controlled by Wendy. This was as fair as I could manage. Wendy struggled, but Julie and her lawyer eventually convinced her to accept the settlement if she wanted to retain any of the remaining money. She wanted one last meeting to vent, but I declined. Her lawyer turned out to be the 5th lover Wendy had in the past 18 months, all city slickers with little financial stability. I tried to remain civil for Billy's sake. As he approached 3, he didn't seem to miss Wendy much. Pam and Ben became my pillars of support, helping me navigate my grief and anger. Wendy's mother continued to babysit Billy, agreeing that if she assisted Wendy in breaking the custody agreement, all contact with Billy would cease. Pam stepped into a surrogate mother role with Ben's support. Billy remained close to Ben, and at work, Ben kept a photo of himself, Pam, and Billy on his desk. People often assumed Billy was Ben's stepson, and Ben allowed that misconception to a point. Initially, Ben asked my permission, explaining that it made him appear more family-oriented and helped with new clients. I surprised him when I gave him a copy of my will, naming him and Pam as Billy's executors and guardians in case anything happened to me. Ben, you're a family man, and you always have been. You have an amazing woman in Pam, and you have us. I'd never seen a male lawyer cry before. It was unexpectedly moving. After some time, I dated a few women. They were enjoyable and met my needs, but none felt like a long-term match. Pam frequently told me that Billy needed a mother. I just stared at her and said, "He has one. As soon as I find someone who's a good match, I'll be married so fast it'll make your head spin." The closest I came to a meaningful relationship was with a lawyer, the senior partner's daughter. She was a few years older than me, recently gone through a rough divorce, had landed a great job on the other coast, and was taking a 3-month break to recover. She needed an escort, and her father reached out to me. "Do me a favor, John. She's new in town, and I'd really like her to attend the banquet with me, but she needs an escort. She's considered beautiful, if that helps." With no reason to decline, I agreed. I rented a Cadillac and felt a sense of déjà vu. Was she beautiful? Absolutely. Just under 5 feet tall, blonde, fair-skinned, with a fantastic figure. She looked like a living porcelain doll. My interest was piqued. I think she felt a spark, too, as her playful side emerged. "Ooh, a real live redneck. I've never been this close to one before. Do you bite?" I gave her my most serious look and replied, "Yes." "Great!" Ben, Pam, and her parents burst into laughter, setting a light-hearted tone for the evening. The event was a high-profile charity banquet, the most prestigious of the year. We were in black tie, and I thought I looked pretty sharp. The food was excellent, and Rhonda, who talked incessantly due to nervousness, kept up a running commentary on the appetizer, the entree, and the dessert. "Have you ever stopped talking?" I asked. She blushed and gave me an innocent smile. "Only when I have something interesting in my mouth." Ben nearly snorted his coffee out of his nose, and Pam giggled. "Come on, you two. This is supposed to be serious business." After dinner, there was a grand orchestra and dancing. Pam had taught me enough to keep from stumbling on the dance floor. Rhonda, a graceful and fluid dancer, was a joy to watch. She danced twice with her father, once with Ben, and the rest of the dances were mine. While Ben and I were waiting for the girls at the bandstand, Wendy walked by. "Ben, John, it's good to see you. Are you out here by yourself, John? You should really get outside more. Let me introduce you to my escort, Robert Morgan. Maybe you know his father, Ben, Wilson Morgan, the founder of the Morgan bank chain." I looked at her, noting her tired appearance and the extra weight she'd put on. One glance at her escort, and it was clear he wasn't there for his scintillating conversation skills. That's when Pam and Sophie arrived. Pam leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. "Miss me, love? I hope so. I want you to be upset all night. It'll make the passionate reunion we have planned even more thrilling. Oh, and I almost forgot. Who are your friends?" I glanced past her and saw Pam laughing, realizing she had filled Sophie in on who Wendy was, and they were fully embracing the moment. "Allow me to introduce everyone properly. Sophie, this is Robert Morgan from the Morgan banking family, and Wendy Blankenship, local businesswoman and my ex-wife. Wendy, Robert. This is Sophie Williams from Williams, Roberts, Howe, and Hatfield. You might have heard of them. Now, darling, shall we dance the waltz?" We left them both gaping as we waltzed away. I leaned in and whispered, "Pam told you who she was, didn't she?" Sophie nestled a bit closer. "Yes, and a bit of background, too. I hope she's having a rough time today." Don't worry, I replied. From the looks we're getting, I think she is. We finished our dance, and Sophie pulled me close for a 2-minute, passionate kiss. Did she see that? I asked. Give me a moment for the blood to return to my brain. Yes, she saw that, and thank you. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Later, Robert asked Sophie to dance, and Wendy asked me for a dance. Just for old time's sake? Sophie smiled sweetly. I'd love to, but I promised all the remaining dances to my partner. Same here, I said. Sorry, Wendy. Maybe next time. Wendy and Robert looked stunned. Pam stifled a laugh behind a napkin as they left without another word. I turned to Sophie. I'm glad you're not staying here permanently. Her face fell. Why say something like that? I'm starting to like you. Because wherever we went, there'd be fights. I fought to keep men away from you, and you fought to keep me away from you. She smiled slowly. What makes you think I'll resist? She didn't resist, and we spent every spare moment together. Pam made sure Billy stayed with her so we could enjoy our weekends. Sophie was the best lover I'd ever had. Despite her petite size, she was surprisingly strong. She never mentioned her age, but I guessed she was about 40, with the firmness and vitality of a 20-year-old. She adored Billy and showed me pictures of her daughter, a cute little girl who looked about 13. My ex has her now. I gave him more time because soon we'll be 3,000 kilometers apart. The thought of Billy being so far away made me sad. Life went on. To keep busy, I opened a barbecue restaurant. Myra was still running her business successfully, so I left her to it. Restaurants are demanding and have a high failure rate, but my solid reputation helped. I bought and outfitted 4 food trucks, sending them to neighboring towns 4 days a week, and they thrived. Despite this success, I had yet to find anyone permanent and had mostly given up searching. But life has a way of surprising you when you're least expecting it. Just when I was content and genuinely happy, tragedy struck. Billy was 9. After school, he'd get off the bus at Pam's house and ride his little 4-wheeler through the woods until I got home. Pam would ride with him, wave at me, and head back inside to give him his afternoon snack, check his schoolwork, and let him help around the house. It was a system that worked well for all of us. On rare occasions when I had a date, he'd stay there overnight with Pam, who had a room set up for him. Then, at 3 o'clock, he called me, crying, "Come over here soon, Daddy. Aunt Pam is lying on the floor crying, and I can't get her up." I sped down the road, my heart pounding. As I arrived, Pam was indeed lying on the floor, sobbing quietly. She wasn't responding or speaking. Just as I was about to call 911, Ben's boss called me. "John, I need you to check on Pam and make sure she's okay." "I'm with her now, but she's not okay. She won't talk. It's not like Ben was in an accident." I could hear the tremor in his voice. "Ben's dead, John. He had a heart attack, and they said it was almost instantaneous. We found him on the floor of his office when he missed a lunch meeting. He'd been gone for about an hour." The news hit me like a punch. I could barely hold on to the phone. Ben was gone? He had been my best friend. But for Pam, he was everything. I wrapped her in my arms as her face momentarily cleared, and she clung to me as if I were her lifeline. Ben. I held her on the couch, rocking her gently. Her tears flowed freely, and I found my own eyes damp with sorrow. Pam seemed almost numb. We arranged the funeral plans after Ben's boss brought us his updated will. Ben had specified that he wanted to be cremated, and his ashes scattered around the farm. "This is the only place I have ever felt like home," he had written. The visitation and service were attended by some truly wonderful people, clients who had become friends, racetrack buddies, and everyone from his firm. Wendy showed up and gave Pam a comforting hug. During the visitation, Pam sat with Billy on her lap, and Wendy's mother, Sarah, beside her. They had grown close over the years, bonding over Billy. Sarah kept a watchful eye on me, her concern evident whenever I was out of sight. Ben was 52, older than Pam, and in good health. The doctors were baffled, attributing his death to a hidden illness they couldn't quite pinpoint. Once the funeral was over and everyone had gone back to their lives, it was time for Pam, Billy, Sarah, and me to begin our own grieving process. We stayed with Pam for about 2 weeks. It wasn't until the end of the second week that she started to show signs of coming back to life. There was a moment of disquiet when Ben's will was read, a stark reminder of the finality of his absence. Among the documents, he had left letters, a personal goodbye to those he cared about. Pam received one, but to this day, I've never asked, and she's never shared its contents. Ben also left a letter for me. Dear John, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I want to thank you for your friendship. You took a stiff Yankee lawyer and helped him become a better person, someone who could relax and truly appreciate what he had. I was honored to be your friend. I've set aside a college fund for Billy, enough for a full tuition. I know you can manage it, but it was my pleasure to do this for him and for you. He's a great kid, and I believe that with your guidance, he will grow into a remarkable man. I hope he remembers me fondly. Now, for the serious part. Take care of Pam, John. She'll need you through these dark times. I know you loved her, and true to your honor and our friendship, you've done nothing to hurt her. Pam needs someone to love her right now. I wish I could be there to see Billy grow into a man. Please find someone for yourself before you give up. Thank you for being the person you are and the friend I needed. Ben. Most of Ben's possessions, his farm, his investments, were bequeathed to Pam. He also left a generous sum to the dirt track he loved so much, funding the installation of new, safer grandstands, an announcer's booth, and an upgraded public address system. The track was renamed in his honor. For a year, Pam struggled to find a sense of normalcy, but eventually decided to leave. I'm moving to Philadelphia for a while. I can't be here anymore. Everywhere I look, I see his ghost. Even though Billy was only 10, he grieved deeply for 2 days. I wept privately. Pam had been my rock for 8 years, and now I felt more lost and alone than ever. Pam handed us the keys to the farm, asking us to keep an eye on it. Every 2 to 3 weeks, I would drive over, start up her little tractor to keep it running, and check on the house's fixtures and plumbing. She left the electricity on and had installed a state-of-the-art security system. Life continued on for me, with Billy at the center of it. He was at the age where he wanted to be with his friends more than with me, and I knew it wouldn't be long before he'd outgrow his dependence on me. Our home became a hub for his friends, always filled with at least 3 of his buddies. I made an effort to get to know them and their parents, inviting them over frequently and talking with them when they picked up their kids. I dated a few of the divorced mothers, but nothing serious came of it. One in particular wanted more, but I wasn't ready for that. I remained in good shape with my affairs in order and had 2 successful businesses. I opened a franchise restaurant, expanding to 4 locations across the state. Each restaurant had at least 3 trucks servicing small towns, and the business was thriving. I found another small town in need of equipment, so I opened a new store there as well. As for Wendy, she faced setbacks in her business, without the favorable equipment rental deals she used to enjoy, and with her chef leaving to start her own venture. Her business struggled until she was forced to close it. She transitioned to an office manager role at a large insurance company, and later married a lawyer. That marriage lasted 18 months before he discovered her infidelity. Wendy is now engaged again, and I hope this one proves to be lasting. She still sees Billy occasionally, mostly during holidays and birthdays. I was exhausted, working out of town on my 6th restaurant. Sarah was watching Billy while I was away, and when I came home, they were both grinning at me. What's going on? I checked to see if my fly was down. We have a visitor. Come in. Pam stepped through the door and immediately threw herself into my arms, sobbing. We'd been keeping in touch regularly, calling each other at least once a month. I could always hear the sadness in her voice, and I'd repeatedly asked her to come back home, but she kept saying she'd think about it. How long do you plan to stay? I asked her. Another 30 or 40 years, I hope. I'm home now, John, and I'm not leaving. I'm tired of visiting parks just to see grass, and I'm tired of living next to strangers who have no interest in being neighbors. I want to see stars instead of smog at night." She took my hand. "And I want to see you every day. And Billy, he's grown so much. He'll probably be taller than you when he's done growing. I want to reconnect with Myra, the guys from the driving range, all my real friends." She started crying on my shoulder, and I held her close, feeling a happiness I hadn't felt in almost 2 years. We got our house in order. Though she initially looked aged and out of shape, she soon regained her vitality. She rode her favorite tractor and tended to the garden, her youth returning with each passing week. Sarah moved into a nearby nursing home, settling into a 1-bedroom apartment. She was surprised when I arranged for her to move to a larger 1-bedroom apartment and asked her to send me all her bills. She protested, but I insisted. I also made regular deposits into her checking account. "There have been times when Billy and I really needed you, and you've managed to avoid us. This is payback. You deserve a bigger apartment so Billy can visit on weekends, and a happy grandmother is what he needs." End of discussion. We had dinner together every night Billy wasn't with his friends, alternating between my place and hers. After 3 months, Pam and I started dating. We enjoyed movies, concerts, and even a little dancing. She visited Ben's old firm and left in tears, though they made sure to invite us to all their events. She insisted we were just old friends, not dating. Everything seemed to fall into place as we sat on the porch swing, watching Billy and his friends tear up the field on their 4-wheelers. It was a bit chilly, so we covered ourselves with a light blanket. I stopped rocking and looked into her eyes. "Marry me." "What?" "Marry me. I've loved you for years. You love me too, but you won't admit it. Let's stop playing house and settle down." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "But we're getting older." "I know you're 50 and I'm 43. I don't care. I love you, and I will love you until the day I die." She swayed, then snorted. "This is an ultimatum. Marry me, or I swear on Ben's memory I'll never set foot on this property again. Yes or no, right now." She was silent, and I walked halfway to the porch when she grabbed me. We tumbled down the steps, and Billy rushed over to us, helping a tearful Pam to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes, dear, I just received some very good news. In a few days or weeks, I'm officially going to be your mom. I hope that makes you happy." That day, I realized just how extraordinary a child I had raised. You've pretty much always been my mom. Now I can say it out loud. I love you, Mom. The wedding and the subsequent party were talked about for years. Myra did her best, and we had a beautiful spring wedding outdoors in a meadow on the farm. The reception took place in a grand tent, with many of Ben's old friends from his firm in attendance. Sophie, visiting her parents, came too, and congratulated Pam, making it clear that she thought Pam was lucky. I knew from her look that I had some explaining to do. The guys at the track restored Pam's old car and presented it to her as a wedding gift. Years flew by in happiness and harmony. Billy graduated from college, got married, and he and his wife started their own business. We gifted them my old house after remodeling it, and they blessed us with 3 grandchildren, naming their son Bennett. Occasionally, Pam would lapse into melancholy, and I knew she was thinking of Ben. On their 50th wedding anniversary, I gave her an oil portrait of him, painted by a famous artist. She went to bed and cried for 2 hours. We hung the portrait over the fireplace. It looked solemn, and although my eyesight isn't what it used to be, with the evening fire burning and Pam sitting on the floor playing with our youngest granddaughter, I could almost swear that Ben was smiling.